Mswatu ingosi thula akaithathe akahambe nayo akaithathe yotenza bakewone akaithathe
The time is 6 a.m. Very good morning to you and welcome to the Monday edition of Kusile Breakfast Show. It is the 6th of July. Really do hope that you had yourself a lovely weekend. I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. Doing amazing. Had a great weekend indeed, as I promised you last week Friday, what I was going to do. I think everything went perfectly, and I think the cherry on top was going to church and the word of God. It's always, a great way to cap off the weekend, but also it fuels us for the new week. How was your weekend?
My weekend was great. Nothing out of the ordinary, but...
Did you get to play tennis?
No,
that sucks.
But I did not. However, we do hope that you had a lovely and safe weekend. Though bringing you back to the program today on my end, we are going to have an official come through talking to us about the second edition of the Eswatini Investment Conference happening at the end of the month, specifically from the 29th to the 31st of July. Last year's edition, 2025, was the inaugural conference that generated 37 billion emalangeni in investment announcements. And this year's theme is connecting capital with opportunity. We want to know what the three-day conference holds, and of course, if there will be targets or investment targets this year, just hopefully we'll get to know the figure.
Yeah, it's very important. The conversation around investment in Eswatini has been a big one for the past, let's say, give or take 5 to 4 years, really because FDI is going to open up a lot of opportunities for employment, and we do have a youth unemployment or an unemployment crisis really in Eswatini. Of course, youth unemployment being top of the top there because we are a young population and we do have a lot of young people who are graduates who are not employed. Some argue it's skills mismatch, some argue it's unemployment, but two things can be right at the same time, and really it's glaring that the jobs are not there. But at the same time, with the jobs that are there, the companies and the corporates are complaining that these people are not really giving us what we expect from them. So two things need to be fixed. We need foreign direct investment in Eswatini. So we're excited for that. But on that topic, we are going to have a conversation with Sanales B, our economist, on the 5 billion rand SACU fund, the fund of funds. And within that fund is going to be many opportunities for foreign direct investment for all the member states of SACU based on how they utilize those funds. And we certainly do want to know from our economist what an economic perspective informs us about how we can best leverage the fund of funds. And Lesbia is going to join us to decode that fund.
Stay with us. The news bulletin coming up shortly.
Attention retailers, importers, clearing agents and customs brokers. All television sets and decoders entering the Kingdom of Eswatini now require mandatory ESTVA authorization before customs clearance. No clearance without valid ESTVA import permit. Don't risk delays at the border. Submit your application 24 to 48 hours before your shipment arrives. We process complete applications in just 1 to 2 working days. Our QR-coded permits make the verification quick and easy. Always double-check your HS codes and quantities for smooth compliance. The process is simple. Step 1. Submit your completed application form. Annex A with product line items for TVs, decoders, and commercial invoice. Step 2. Eswatini TV reviews and approves. Step 3. Make payment and complete verification. Step 4. Receive your permit. Step 5. Clear customs smoothly at the border. Make sure you have all your required documents, a completed application form, Annex A detailing your product line items, commercial invoice, valid TV retailer license, and letter of authority if applicable. Our permits feature QR codes for easy border verification. For assistance, email us at license@eswatinitv.co.za or call our help desk. Apply before your shipment arrives. Ensure compliance and avoid delays. Remember, all TV sets and decoders entering the Kingdom of Eswatini must have a valid ESTVA import permit. Thank you. Act now.
Mosotla mahle sichubeka nelihlelo lethu kulesikhathi sidawubona titindzaba tethu tesiswati umhlonishwa uNdunankulu Russell Dlamini sawuthumise inhlangano yakamhlaba etekuchumana i-International Telecommunication Union leyatiwa nge-ITU. Inhlangano ke lena lechubeke nekwesekela live ekuthuthukiseni luhlangothi lwetebuciko. Kanti ke Ndunankulu uthumise lenhlangano ngesikhathi yahlangene namabhalane wayo le-ITU lekungu-Doreen Bogdan Martin bebahlanganele enhloko-ofisi yalenhlangano eGeneva eveni leSwitzerland.
Ekufikeni kwakhe umhlonishwa Ndunankulu Russell Dlamini lapha enhlokodolobha yelive leSwitzerland eGeneva ube nemhlangano namabhalane wenhlangano etekuchumana emhlabeni i-International Telecommunication Union Doreen Bogdan Martin. Umhlangano ubanjelwe enhloko-ofisi yalenhlangano letinte lapha eGeneva. Kulomhlangano Ndunankulu ubonge wagangatsa ku-ITU ngekuchubeka nekwesekela live lakangwane ekuthuthukiseni uhlangothi lwetebuciko. Ingani ngeminyaka wa 2023 i-ITU yalibambisa live ngesikhathi lakha umgomo welihlangothi lwetebuciko i-ICT policy. Lo mgomo loyo ngokanye lokwatala litiko letekwatisa i-Ministry of ICT libandla lengamele etekuchumana eSwatini i-ISICOM kanye nekuvula uhlangothi lwetekuchumana. Ngesikhathi live lakangwane lingena esigabeni sekusakata ngetebuciko i-digital terrestrial television, i-ITU iphindze yalibamba ngato timbili live ngeminyaka wa 2017 ngesikhathi lihlela umgomo wekuvikela emaswati kubongcondvomshina i-National Cyber Security Strategy. Ndunankulu ibongile lenhlangano ngekuqeqesha emaswati kakhweni ema-applications lenta kutsi emaswati akhone kutfola lusito lwahulumende asebentisa tindlela tebuciko. Mhlonishwa Ndunankulu uchazelele lo mabhalane wa-ITU ukuthi live laseSwatini liyatigcabha kakhulu ngekubalunga la-ITU. Ndunankulu uthi njengoba live lakangwane lithuthuka ngalamakhulu emagonso liyayidzinga inhlangano yaka-ITU ukuthi ichubeke njalo nekulibambisa ekuthuthukiseni tinhlangothi letitsite kanye nekuthuthukisa kusebenta kwahulumende kuleti tebuciko. Umhlonishwa Ndunankulu uthi uhulumende uphokophele ukuthi i-internet igcine ingembe ecolo iphindze itholakale kuto tonke tindzawo eveni. Ngakho-ke i-ITU ingadlela inzima lenkulu ekutheni emave lafana lakangwane akhone kusitakala. Kusasa ngemsombuluko umhlonishwa Ndunankulu ubheke ukuthi amelele ingwenyama mswati wesithathu emhlanganweni lo ingayizivele lapha emave lamalunga amhlabuhlangene tinhlangano letitimele kanye letinye tinhlangothi titawuhlanganisa tinhloko tibukisane ukuthi ingabe i-artificial intelligence i-AI ingasebenziswa njani kangcono. Kulomhlangano kutawubukwa ukuthi i-AI inamthelela muni kutemasiko emnothweni kanye nekuthi emave lasathuthuka asekelwa njani kude azuze ngalokuphelele ku-AI. Angeke isalele ngaphandle indzaba yokuthi i-AI ingagcini seyilimata emave emhlaba. Kubika ngithini Gule ngiseGeneva eveni leSwitzerland.
Ngemuva kwekubanjwa kwemicimbi Eswatini lobe ubanjelwe edolobheni eMbabane uhlelwe yi-A Peculiar People ngaphansi kwesicubulo lesithi Creating the Future. Umsebenzi-ke lobe ubanjwe ngenyanga yeNkhwekhweti lizinyane umbane Sakhizwe libe selivakashela tindzawo letahlukene kuleli ngenhloso yokucondzisisa kahle imikhicito yakuleli. Kulolu vakasho lwalo-ke lizinyane lelukatse-ke lube seliphetha mhla ka-25 June lihlangene nebanikati bemabhizinisi lahlukene lenta nemikhicito leyahlukene lahlola nemikhicito yabo laphindze labonisana nabo endzabeni yemasu lahlukene ekutfutfukisa lemikhicito kute-ke kutawuphakama lizinga laloko lokukhicitwa kuleli kufakwe luphawu loluthi Made in Eswatini. Ngekusho kwesitatimende lesitfunyelelwe betindzaba lesiphuma kule nkampani A Peculiar People, loluvakasho lwezinyane lufaka sandla lesibande ekucinisekiseni ukukhula kwelinani lebantfu labatfola umsebenzi, kukhula kwemikhicito kanye nemnotfo welive, kanye nekucinisekisa ukuthi live lifika esigabeni lesihloniphekile kutemabhizinisi emhlabeni. Sifundza saseshiselweni sisukumisa umsebenzi wekuhlelembisa intfutfuko etinhlangotsini letahlukene pheceleti Shiselweni Development Initiative Concept. Kanti-ke mabhalane wakulesifundza abhekithwala uthi yebo kona sifundza sikhona kepha lokubambelele intfutfuko kulesifundza kubate tinhlelo letingumkhombandlela wekutfutfukisa sona lesifundza.
Kulomhlangano lovisi lesifundza ishiselweni ihlanganyele nemikhono yahulumende leyahlukene kwetfulela nekubukisana lokungendiwa kutfutfukisa umnotfo nenhlalakahle yesive eshiselweni. Mabhalane walesifundza abhekithwala uchaza tinhlelo letibonakala tingadlala indzima lenkulu kuletsa intfutfuko.
Sifundza yebo sikhona kodwa-ke kusebenta kwaso bekusokude umkhombandlela lokukhomba ukuthi sitawulandzela naku nanaku letinto tibe programmatic. Singasebenzi nje out of the blue ukuthi namhla sesicabanga ukuthi ngasenda naku akube phasi kube sephepheni. Lapha nje sibuke ama-issues lafaka bo-tourism, sabuke ama-issues lafaka bo-agriculture, sabuka ukuthi sinema-strong points ku-timber industry nema-firms nawo la infrastructure yesifundza imenjani njengoba wati nje ukuthi siswela ukuthi si-convince uhulumende kabanti ukuthi sininze lo mgwaqo wesifundza wonke ngelitiyela. Lokho kuyakutshela lokho ukuthi mune kakhulu lo msebenzi sibuka ama-issues lafaka ekhathi ama-recreational facilities within boshiselweni nathi sisifundza ke sesichamuke nema-athletes latawuthi waphuma esifundzeni ayongenela ama-Commonwealth Games bo-swimming kude ama-swimming pools la dinto tonke leti lekufuna ukuthi sifundza siti-improve sibambisana kakhulu nema-private partnerships asukume lama-SMEs abe maningi ngoba ukukhula kwemnotho kuya sekuthenini bangakanani laba bosomabhizinisi labancane labati-involve ku-economic activity.
Umphathisifundza umhlonishwa Themba Masuku uthi yonke imisebenzi ingakentiwa kumele ihanjiswe tingoni letifanele kute iphumelele.
Sibuke ukuthi akufanele kusale boba betikhulu kulo ngoba boba betikhulu i-bedrock yayo yonke inhlobo yekuthuthuka. Nangabe ushiye bona ngaphandle kuloku angeke lelive sabe ngilosikhuluma onke malanga awasithuthukile emakhaya kunjani sithi-ke bataba ingcenye ngoba-ke thine njengelihhovisi sisebenta nabo kuleli viki lilandzelana kuleli tawu nje nasinemhlangano nabo batawusinika bobabe labatawuta bakhulume lale kufanele ukuthi bangabe bakubeka nabo bakukhulumisa bafake kuloku ngoba wonke umthwalo kubo.
Kuletinye tinhlelo tentfutfuko letikhona lesifundza sihlele kugucula tindzawo letinemlandvo ukuthi tibe tekukhanga tivakashi kudvonswe nensha ukuthi ngenele imisebenzi yetekuvakasha kutfutfukisa emasiko kanye nasekusunguleni emabhizinisi. Kubika Thando Kuhle Mdluli, Nhlangano.
Libandla le-Apostolic Faith Church International lithi liyambonga umfundisi Mpilezwane ekubeni ngumshumayeli ngephansi kwaleli bandla. Lokhu kulandzela tinsolo tekubulala lokuyindzaba leshiye live lonkhana lishaqekile. Kanti-ke lokhu kuvakele ngalobu-ke wona lamasonto lapha eveni Isabelo Masuku uma khulumisana nalo msakazo ngelisonto.
Kutselangeni lanamuhla lomsakazo wanikela isondweni Apostolic Faith International kuyobuka simo njengoba kulisondvo lecala kusukela umfundisi impilo ezwane lweluswe ngaphansi kwalabekwe emacala ekubulala tinsatselo talomsakazo titse natifika kuleli sonto kumatsapha takhanza khala libhungane noko bese kuyevakala ukuthi bekunenkonzo lenkulu eveni labomakhelwane lapho bekuhlangene khona kuthandazelwa lo monakalo impilo ezwane kuyavela ukuthi ngephambi kwekube ngumfundisi wake wabhekana netinsolo tebucala mengameli waleli bandla lasabelo masuku uyaveta libandla lelincumile ngazwane nekuthi yini leyabenta abamithemba noma sabuye ematilongweni
silibandla nje vele asasukile nomthetho yamkhulula lengathi usungamkhulula njani noma wenda njani thine vele cha ngeke singabe sidlala nje nemlilo nje uthi kusilimele kangaka nelibandla limele awunana ngeke kuthi umsebenzi la ngawenda ngoba ezivumbuke into nje le athi sifihle successfully emehlweni ethi sonke ngoba bamema left right and center kuthi lo wakwesola kodwa nje ke ukhaka ngeke kumbe libandla ngeke vele lithihlanganise nalo kwavela kwekuthi abebanjwe lapha ngalokungesiko bamkhulula nje asingeke siye lelo kwazaneni emabhukweni emthetho kwathiwa bengesiko cha sathi mhlambe kuliwa naleli ngoba phela lidala talented nebakithi siyengeke ukuthi kusho sathana ulwa naleli khono lalomuntu likhulu sikukhulu-ke siyengeke sibone-ke nale misebenzi
kwatise ukuthi izwane bekaphinza beliphoyisa lemmango lobuke wona emaphoyisa emango embhuleni Jabulani Dlamini ulilele livu wacela sive ukuthi sichubeke sithembele kubo
asichubeke sive siwasebenzise emaphoyisa emango sichubeke futhi siwethembe sichubeke futhi siwathinze lapho khona kufanele ukuthi siwathinze khona uma ngabe kunebucala lobendekile kungabi ukuthi mhlawumbe lokwendekile mhlawumbe emaphoyisa emango onke anjalo akusinjalo
libandla livetile ukuthi lisetawuchubeka nekwetama kuletha umoya webunye kuletikhatsi tebumadima lobikako ngumpendulo kumbi embabane
Impahla pheceleti ama-assets Eswatini Bank ikhule nga-5% kulo mnyaka mali wa-2026 yafika ku-3.2 billion emalangeni. Lokhu kuvetwe ngusiboniso mdluli lobukete imali kuleli bhange ngesikhathi leli bhange lihlangene nebahleli betindzaba netinsatheli eMbuluzi.
Njengoba ama-assets aleli bhange akhule nga-5% kumnyaka timali wa-2026 efika ku-3.2 billion emalangeni, ngemnyaka timali wa-2025 ebe ku-3.1 billion emalangeni. Imali lebolekwe emakhasimende kanye nema-advances yona yehlile nga-2% yefika ku-2.1 billion emalangeni, isuka ku-2.2 billion emalangeni emnyakeni lophelile wa-2025. Ngekusho kwe-Eswatini Bank, nakucathaniswa intengo yelibhange ngalokuphelele financial balance sheet ikhulile nga-5% yefika ku-3.2 billion emalangeni emnyakeni timali wa-2026. Kusimama kwaleli bhange kutemali nakucathaniswa nebungoti lelingabhekana nabo, capital adequacy ratio, kungetulu kwelinani lelibekwe libhange lelikhulu lelungu-8% njengoba kulo mnyaka timali losetulu kuku-13.9%. Loku-ke ngekusho kwaleli bhange kukhomba ukuthi lisesimeme kutemali. Ngemnyaka timali lophelile wa-2025 bekuku-15.9%. Etfula umbiko wemali waleli bhange siboniso mdluli uchubeke waveta ukuthi imali lefakwe emakhasimende kuleli bhange ikhulile nga-18% nakucathaniswa umnyaka neminyaka yefika ku-2.3 billion emalangeni, isuka ku-1.9 billion emalangeni ngemnyaka wanga-2025. Imali lengasuyo indalo yona ikhulile nga-7% yefika ku-144 million emalangeni, kanti ngeminyaka wanga-2025 beyiku-135 million emalangeni. Lokhu kubangwe kukhula kwemabhuku lavuliwe, kukhula kwekusebenziswa kwetinhlelo telibhange ngemakhasimende kanye nekukhula kwekutfumelwa kwemali ngetinhlelo tema-e-wallets. Tikwelete temakhasimende alelibhange tikhulile kumnyaka timali wa-2026 kusuka ku-6.3% ngeminyaka wanga-2025 tefika ku-8.6%. Lo mbiko uthi tisuke ku-7.1 million emalangeni eminyakeni wa-2025 tefika ku-45.6 million emalangeni eminyakeni wa-2026. I-Eswatini Bank ithi lokhu kubange kwekuthi amakhasimende angakhoni ukubhadala kahle ngenxa yekungasimami kahle kwemnotfo lokholele ekutheni emaswati alahlekelwe ngumsebenzi, tekuthutha impahla letibike ukuthi ibhizinisi ayihambi kahle, tekulima letingakasebenzi kahle ngenxa yekugucuka kwesimo selitulu kanye nemabhizinisi lamancane langakakhoni ukubhadala kahle ngenxa yekungabhadaleki kahle nawende imisebenzi leyahlukene. Umcondzisi waleli bhange Dr. Nozizwe Mulela uthi nanoma kubonakala ukuthi leli bhange lacala kuba netinkinga ngeminyaka wanga-2016 kepha umkhuhlane i-COVID-19 walithikabeta kakhulu njengoba kwakhanzakala ukuthi alikasimami kahle kutebuciko njengalamanye amabhange lokwenda ukuthi emakhasimende aphume. Uthi kungako nyalo bagcinisa indlela yabo yekusebenta kutebuciko njengoba eminyakeni lesihlanu leyengcile sebafake imali leyengcako ku-170 million emalangeni kuthuthukisa tebuciko. Wephethe ngekuniketa emakhasimende siciniseko sekuthi i-Eswatini Bank ilibhange lelisimeme. Lobikako nginelisiwendla ngamandla kunasiphiwo Dlamini esibebe.
Licala lekugagadlela libonakala lichubeka nekwenteka lapha event njengoba sekunendvodza yase-Hereford liboshiwe ngekusolakala ukuthi igagadlele bantfwana lababili labaneminyaka leyimfica.
Sinayo vele indvodza leneminyaka leng-33 yasenzaweni yakahoho lekuthiwa ufunela ubanjiwe emva kwekube atholakale ukuthi asolakale ukuthi bekadlungula bantwana lababili labaneminyaka leng-9 kuthiwa ke lokhu ukwende emahlandla lamaningi laba ke bantwana kuthiwa bagcina sebapotela labadzala basekhaya le kwathi ke nasebayilandzela vele babona ngazi ukuthi lokhu lokusho ngilabantwana kukhona indzaba kumbe la ngabe sesowuyayiphendvula lona lo sabanjiwe nyalo kungako ke ube sesobayamthola wona emaphoyisa asebuhleni lesibheke nje ukuthi kumbe lilangeni lakusasa avele khona phambi kwenkantolo lapho khona atawubhekana namanje ngaso sona lesigameko lesi. Singemaphoyisa vele sifuna indvodza leneminyaka leng-36 le igwazelenye leneminyaka leng-33 basenzaweni yakulavumisa emgampondo lapho khona kuthiwa bekunemicimbi wekukhungalifindvo lapho ke khona shothi lamadvodza akhona lena enzaweni babe sebawapha imbudi ukuthi ngoba sikhathi sesihambile sekutabathe isikhathi kumbe sekupheka lena nyama kwase kuthiwa sebangayithatha lena bahambe nayo ekhaya. Bathi teke basahamba ke wasemunye wabo uba ngilo ngathi sowufuna kuhamba nayo kanti phela abahlali indzawonye lona ke lomunye lokwaziwe kuthiwa ube sesoyabuta ukuthi ngeke phela bese sohamba njani nayo yonke lenyama ngoba basiphe sobabili ngilaphe ke khona lo umsolwa lesimfunako ube uyahamba uye ekhaya nakabuya wabuya nesikhali wasusihloma kuyena lo mngani wakhe ngekuthi sekubangwa yona lenyama phela ube seke sekuthiwa ngoba ungathi bese badle nakulokudzakisa ko ingcondo khona nabasesele emcimbini kuthiwa yena lona msolwa ube sesophinze ulinga kugwaza nalabanye lebe bakhona lapho dutane lebe bazama kubakhulumisa phela sikhuluma nje kunginyalo ugcwele tonati ganga singemaphoyisa ke siyacela ukuthi lo ongamati lona mfokade akasithinze emaphoyiseni asekalavumisa noma ashaye yona inombolo yenhlaba mkhosi ngoba vele kuyabita ukuthi ete atophendvula licala lakhe leku attempta kubulala. Siyabona ukuthi lapho ukhanza ukuthi sihlaba umkhosi kube khona lapha lofunekako kumbe sekunebucala lobuthitho lobentekako emaswati akalibali ukuthi asilume donati indlebe ngaleso sikhathi sifuna labo bantu sicela nje ukusho ukuthi siyakubonga lokhu ngoba vele singemaphoyisa angethe sakhona kwenta umsebenzi wethu ngendlela lengiyo singasitwa ngiwe emaswati sitawucela nje ukuthi emimangweni ababe ngilabo lababukelelana nako phela ungayekeli na ubona kamakholana kwenteka licala sheshe uhambe uye ubika lapho ungabika khona ukuthi sitogwema lokuthi sichubeke lobucala noma ke nasebevele bendekile sitokhona ukuthi lona lo wende lobucala atholakale ahambe abhekane nato tinkantolo.
Sikhwama sahulumende lesiboleka abalimi imali yekusungula emabhizinisi kutekulima i-Eswatini Agriculture Development Fund. Sithi litiko letekulima lithi liyayisebenta endzaba yokuthi lenyuseke emaphakelo aso ngekusebenzisana netinhlangothi letitsindzekako. Lesikhwama sithi lokhu kwentelwa ukuthi kukhuphuke linani lalabasitakalako nelive ke lilwene kuyeswelakala kwematfuba emisebenzi. Lokhu kushiwo ngilobuke lihlangothi lwetebuciko kulesikhwama zwelivilakati lapho bona naletinye tikhwama bebafundzisa insha yakamanzini ngematfuba labanawo ngemgcibelo khona edolobheni lakamanzini.
Lo msebenzi lo wendiwe ngiletinhlangothi unika lithemba ukuthi live litokulwa ngcono nokwesolakala kwamathuba emisebenzi njengoma insha le ungenile ivuleke emehlo yetinhlangothini letahlukene. Zwelivi lakatwe Eswatini Agriculture Development Fund uthi kwenyuka kwamaphakelo lesikhwama angeke kugcine ngekuvula amathuba emisebenzi kepha kutawuphindze kusite nelive lilwe nobusweti.
Lokukhulu kakhulu siyafisa lokubakhuthaza thina ukuthi abantu labasha abede babonakale batodlala lichaza lezide kule space saka agriculture ngoba ikakhulu kade thina lesibuka ukuthi le future ye agriculture ihletila tandleni tabo kungaba ukuthi bafuna kuba ka production noma ka processing noma ka value anyway ku value addition, but nje sithi abantu labasha ababuye badlale lichaza lelibonakalako kule titaka agriculture emakhaya athuthuke abe netimali leti sufficient ukuthi bangakhona ukuthi baphile baphindze bakhone ukuthuthukisa ema-business abo baphindze sikhone ukuthi sithengisele nemave angaphandle. Uyachubeka umhlonishwa wethu minister ukuthi asizamele ukuthi asihlanganisele lapha nalapha kuze ukuthi at least basibukele ku-resource envelope ukuthi bangangeta lokungakanani kude ukuthi kusitakale emaswati lamaningi.
Phila Nhlabathi lobukede kumakethe esikhwameni se-Youth Fund ufundisa insha ngetinto lokumele iticaphele isafaka ticelo tekubolekwa imali.
Abantu abathanda ukuthi abende kahle le-research yabo bangasabi ukubuda ababude kulomnyela umbonile into embili umbuzo ukuthi lokhu kwenta kanjani ukubita malini. Ngokuqala lo siyesithola nemabhizinisi phambi ukuthi bawathola ku-internet but abakenti icwaningo lakangwane in terms of market research kuva ukuthi lakangwane itawulunga. So siyabakhuthaza ukuthi abayende kahle le-market research ibe clear. Bese-ke kwesibili nabenda letimali lama-cash flow abanga-estimate kakhulu ababuke kulabanye.
Umfundisi Priscilla Diati uthi imisebenzi yalolu hlobo basetawuchubeka nawo nakuletinye tindzawo.
We are going to continue to see that the idea that we've launched today, it's not just going to die in the eggs, but it has to hatch. It has to give birth. We need to see the productivity of what we have started today. We need to see our youth getting on our feet. We need to see our youth getting out there and doing something.
Eswatini Standards Authority nayo ivetile ukuthi itandla tawo tivulekile kuqinisekisa ukuthi imikhiqizo yayo insha isezingeni ngaphambi kwendluliselo emakethe. Lo bikako ngumpendulo Gumbi kaManzini.
Kutemdlalo sizwe Mabuza welicembu le-Next Generation Taekwondo uthi umdlalo wabo laba nawo ke njalo ngeminyaka ukhonile kukhanga emacembu la ngemashumi lamabili nakubili 42 lasuka ke emaveni lasithupha kulesifundza se-Afrika. Mabuza uthi lokhu kukhomba kukhula kwalomcimbi lo lungiswa ngulelicembu kanti ke yabe khuluma nakuchubeka lo mdlalo enyuvesi lenkhulu yeveni kuMatsapha.
Taekwondo lolungiswa kelicembu lakuleli le-Next Generation Taekwondo Club bese libamba lo mcimbi kwesithupha lonyaka. Emaviki lebeka khona beyasuka emaveni lafaka ekhathi eNingizimu Afrika, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Botswana kanye naye Eswatini. Kanti njalo ngeminyaka ukhomba kukhula njengokusho komsunguli walo mcimbi Sizwe Mabuza lekathi inombolo tikhula njalo ngeminyaka.
Ema-club aphume ngetingani in total sinema-club langu-42 lamuhla lakhompyuthako la. Lithi lokhu kukhomba kukhula lokukhulu kwale event, kukhomba kukhula lokukhulu kwa Eswatini Taekwondo, kukhomba kukhula lokukhulu kwa Next Generation Taekwondo Academy nekubambisana kwayo neSwazi Tigers. So lokhu sibona ngale setup yale competition ukuthi ngeminyaka improve how we do the organizing.
Kanti lo nyaka bekunake umengameli wenhlangano ye-Taekwondo esifundeni le-Centers ne-Afrika Moshosha Molape lekathi lo mcimbi lona umqoka kakhulu kubo njengoba uyabasita kulungiselela imidlalo leminye lemikhulu efaka ekhathi imidlalo ye-Region 5 letodlalela eMozambique makuphela lo mnyaka.
Some of these athletes here are the athletes who have qualified for their member national associations to be part of the African Union Sports Council Region 5 in Maputo. And we are also going to check them again in December. This does not only speak to the athletes, it also speaks to the technical official. You can't have a game without the technical officials. So Games of this nature provide a learning or educational platform for the technical officials as well.
Jonas Sekhwale waseNingizimu Afrika uthi lakubonile kuyamjabulisa kakhulu njengoba ubonile nabomake bameleleke kahle njengoba banezinombolo tabo letinhle lebetikhona kulo mcimbi.
I'm glad that, we have a whole lot of females here. And I can safely say that the future is bright because now we need to integrate them from not just being athletes, but also to the boardroom as well.
Matthias Utui welicembu laseMozambique kanye naSensei Mazwei welicembu laseZimbabwe bobabili bavete bomcoka walo mcimbi bathi uyabasita kulungiselela leminye imidlalo lemkhulu letako kanti-ke ukhicita nabo bantfwana labalikusasa lalemidlalo.
Swata mahle tingako-ke tindzaba tethu tesiswati sitawubahlola etimakethe sitawubuya sichubeka nehlelo masinyane.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
Welcome back. The Southern African Customs Union has unveiled what could become one of the most significant shifts in regional economic policy in decades at the 9th SACU Heads of State Summit in Cape Town. Leaders approved the establishment of a regional innovative funding mechanism, a 5 billion rand fund of funds that will finance development projects across the 5 member states beginning 2027-2028 and 2028-2029 financial years. Now, the fund will be capitalized from the common revenue pool with technical work that is now underway on governance, access criteria, project selection, as well as partnerships with development finance institutions and the private sector. But unlike the annual SACU revenue sharing arrangement that countries like the Kingdom of Eswatini receive every year, now this is an investment vehicle that is designed to accelerate industrialization, regional value chains, infrastructure, and economic diversification. It also comes at a time of growing global uncertainty. We've heard of protectionism, supply chain disruptions, as well as increased urgency for Africa to leverage the opportunities that are presented by the AfCFTA. So what exactly is this fund? How will it work? And what does it mean for Eswatini's economy, our businesses, our taxpayers, as well as the future competitiveness? Sanela Sbiya, our economist, joins us now and is going to help us really understand what this fund is as well as its implications. Sanela, thank you so much. For some of our viewers this morning hearing about this fund for the very first time, maybe break it down in terms that anyone can understand, this 5 billion rand SACU fund, and why has it been created?
Thank you, Mr. Ngumado. Good morning to you and also good morning to the viewers. So as you know that under SACU, there is 5 countries which is Eswatini, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, and Lesotho. So all these countries trade as an impetus to improve, regional integration. But one of the key issues that we usually face when we look and talk of regional integration is that the disparities within the member states in terms of industrialization, and then therefore it becomes quite imperative that you have an impetus or a funding source that can assist countries that push forward with their industrialization endeavors. We do know that under the SACU revenue sharing formula, there is a developmental component, but countries have always decried that for the lower states, even though they may benefit quite larger portions compared to other countries on that component, it remains relatively, ineffective in terms of ensuring that countries are able to push their developmental endeavors and also align that with their industrialization endeavors. So therefore, this fund comes at a time where SACU countries sat down and decided that, for us to better integrate and for us to converge in terms of industrial infrastructure and therefore our benefit from the revenue pool, we have to somehow close the gap in industrialization. So we've seen that we have countries like Botswana and South Africa who are quite leading the industrialization pack, while we have other countries like Lesotho and Eswatini who remain relatively behind those countries. And you also need to make sure that you're able to set the feed and level the field in terms of those disparities, so that the smaller countries within the SACU community can be in a position to attract big businesses to come into their into their domiciles, because you need to have quite a number of investment in infrastructure to allow for bigger businesses to come in, and then also in order for smaller countries to grow to a level where they're able to compete with South Africa, they do need this, I would just call it aid for trade, but in this case we know it's going to be given in forms of loans, and it's going to be channeled through one of the multilateral development finance institutions. But what is key about this is the fact that it is going to actually just target the 5 SACU countries, which minimizes the competition from these multilateral funding entities, which have to fund multiple projects from multiple countries. So it's just going to make it easy for countries to access this fund.
All right, and how is it any different from the traditional SACU revenue sharing arrangement that countries like ours, Eswatini, receive annually?
It's different in the sense that what SACU is now doing. Remember, in the earlier stages, I started talking of the developmental component within the SACU revenue sharing formula. So what is going to happen now is, instead of this money being transferred directly into the fiscal purse, countries are going to have to prepare funding proposals and request this money as loans. So now it has this additional impetus that is going to come in with an earmarked project within the industrialization spectrum, and then that project is what is going to eventually get implemented, and that is what countries are going to work on, instead of the money going into the centralized pool and without it being earmarked for anything, and then it ends up being utilized within the daily expenses and operations of government, and with little or none of it going to developmental initiatives. So now this one is going to be earmarked funding that is going to go directly into industrialization.
All right, so then of course you mentioned that the fund will be financed from the common revenue pool. Now, should Eswatini be concerned that this could reduce future SACU revenue receipts, or is the long-term return expected to outweigh the short-term cost?
So basically, based from what we can read, Mr. Nxumalo, obviously, if you are now taking 5 billion to capitalize this fund and you are putting it there, or even if it's not the 5 billion, even if it's 2 billion or a billion, essentially you're saying countries are going to get less from the revenue pool, because it's going to now be going through the fund of funds. But what we are looking into, Nxumalo, is a situation where ideally, you would find that it's more the developmental component that is somewhat reduced, but countries can still apply for it, but apply for it through the funds of funds and still be able to get that money. The only difference is now that money is going to be earmarked, and it's going to go towards industrialization. And depending on how it is finally determined and operationalized, you would find that now this somewhat acts as a loan to smaller countries. So in the first couple of years, so we would expect the next 2027, 2028 to reflect this dip, in the sense that we've now created a separate entity. So what we usually would receive through the SACCO revenues would now have to reflect the fact that there's been a 5 billion that has been set aside. But when you then look into the overall government budget, you would then find that this is money which we can now still apply for and get through budget support loans into the kingdom. So in terms of the cash flow, it's not going to affect government's cash flow much, but it does take away the flexibility for government to say, I have this much in developmental funding, this is how I'm going to use it. But right now, there's going to have to be a clear and concise, proposal to say this is what we want to do, and can you support us in this manner? So when you have to look at it in the short term, you might see those glitches in maybe in the next 2 to 3 years. But going forward, what we expect is countries are going to be investing in industrialization, unlocking economic potential. So if we utilize this fund well, you are going to see probably an increase in domestic revenue mobilization, and you're also going to see an increase in the smaller countries' contribution into the common revenue pool. And then that means in the next, say in year 4 and 5, we would then be talking a different tune, where we are now competing at a different level, and we're contributing a bit more to the revenue, to the common revenue pool.
Yeah, and the communique describes it as a fund of funds. What does that mean in practical investment and development finance terms?
So basically, we're saying it's a fund of funds. So basically, it's just stating the fact that this is a fund that we are creating, but we've taken it from, the SACCO revenue pool. So now that's the first one. And then secondly, by fund of funds, you would expect that this fund is going to operate in a way in which African leaders have been agitating for these multilateral partners to start operating in the sense that you expect the multilateral partners to, you expect this fund to have lower interest compared to multilateral partners. You expect this fund to have less conditionalities than multilateral partners. And also you'd expect that this fund would actually also call for, say, project-specific accounts within, developing countries, within the SACCO countries. Because what we are seeing here is there are these gaps that need to be dealt with, and you can only deal with those if you're coming through the thinking and the frame of a developing country, where you want to get an interest rate that is closer to market rates compared to what we've seen happening in the multilateral space. You would also want to get funding that will help you with your developmental agendas, instead of having to work within a huge spectrum. And then another thing that we have here is the countries within SACCO themselves are going to have the leeway to set up the terms and set up the direction that this fund should take, which is something that these small countries, and mostly African countries, do not have a say in these multilateral organizations. If you look at, for example, the World Bank, we've seen a couple of years back where we saw the president of Kenya. We also even saw President Ramaphosa calling for that, equity within multilateral institutions, where we find that Africa does not even have a seat in the board of the World Bank, but Africa is one of the major recipients of the loans. So now you're going to have a fund where these African countries are going to have a seat, and they're going to be in control and in charge of what needs to happen. They're going to dictate the terms. They are going to get an interest rate that is quite favorable, which is closer to what the developed North is getting. So that is why we're saying it's a fund of fund. It's more what you call a disruptive mechanism. And then also we've seen in other instances, no matter where, these in the multilateral financing scale landscape, for example, if you were to go now and ask for funding to build a solar power plant, to build a thermal power station, you might not necessarily get that funding, or you have to jump through hoops and hoops to get that, because there are those, that green movement which is ongoing in the global north, and we find that for Africa to develop, for example, with one power plant, Eswatini can actually get closer to energy sufficiency. But you ask yourself why you're not building it, because the multilateral institutions don't have an appetite for such. So we see there's always that gap. But when you have a fund that is going to be localized and Africanized and coming through and funded by Africans themselves, it does show that you can move towards a bit of sustainability and close the north and south divide. And then also, Nxumalo, I cannot emphasize the fact that by virtue of this fund being funded by Africans themselves, it gives autonomy and it says to the world, as Africa, we are ready to play and there is something we can do. Let us do it and let us show the world that it is possible.
When we look at our economy here in Eswatini, just which sectors are best positioned to benefit if the country prepares effectively?
So basically, we've seen the country moving towards agro-processing and food processing. So we should see a lot of investments within that space. And then also we should see a lot of investments within the roads infrastructure, even though we have one of the best roads infrastructures in the region. But by the fact that we are country locked, we do need to find ways to push the boundaries and actually move beyond the fact that we are just bottled within countries. So the way we do that is to improve connectivity. Now that is the rail and road and air transport, which we expect there's going to be investments into that space as well, improving our cargo handling capabilities. And then also we cannot talk industrialization and not talk technology, Mr. Nxumalo. So we should expect a lot of investments, or our first bid and our first try to that fund that will actually be coming through from one of those sectors, in my assertion.
Yeah, and the summit also placed strong emphasis on regional value chains. What opportunities could emerge for local manufacturers as well as our exporters, rather?
So, when you talk regional value chains, Mr. Nxumalo, I think that is quite critical, because we need to find a way of, having one of the SACO countries doing what they do best. So we would expect to see growth in food processing, because we already have a giant down there in Malkens, and we would want to see that giant being integrated much deeper into the regional value chain of the entire conglomerate. And then it also does bring into mind an opportunity for saying, how can we get our, say, agricultural producers in Eswatini to be incorporated into a much bigger manufacturing plant within the region, and therefore creating that value where at every stage of the process we get to do a bit of beneficiation and move the product across as a higher value chain type of product. So we are going to see that comparative advantage coming into play, and once we get that comparative advantage with countries moving towards those sectors which basically are beneficial to them, and we are going to see more cooperation within the region. But we also expect that SADC in itself should play a role in ensuring that we make it relatively easier for countries to cooperate amongst themselves, and be able to produce and send commodities across. So that is why we are talking of this industrialization fund. And once you can get to structure the program and the proposals that are coming through to ensure that they are going to support the different value additions in different countries and make it seamless for those to move within countries, then we would actually be moving towards improving regional value chains, and also where you can lower your costs of production so that you can have a conglomerate coming in to set up in Eswatini, and then doing one end of the production here, and then transporting the product to another region where it's relatively cheaper. So to do that, you need to ensure that you have the road networks, you have the flights, you have the connectivity in terms of internet that is required, and then therefore you are able to participate within that space. So it's a space that literally every country can be in a position to participate in. And then we're also seeing, a lack of integration within the technology space. We have a lot of talent domestically, but we are failing to to sell those services. If there's one thing that Africa is failing to do, is to sell those services. So we're hoping that with this fund and with this call towards global regional value chains, we would see a lot of this production, bouncing off and knocking off in each other, where you have a bit of the programming happening in Eswatini and a bit of the programming happening in Botswana and a bit of the programming happening in South Africa, and then you find that the final sale or the point of sale is now within South Africa, where we are all taking advantage of those areas in which we have a comparative advantage and a competitive advantage in.
Something that you've hinted on in some of your answers this morning, the importance of this initiative in helping SACCO countries become less dependent on customs revenue, but more so focused on productive investment. I want you to reiterate on that importance and further explain to us, just how imperative that is.
So for SACCO countries, Mr. Ngumalo, to close the gap in industrialization and have that convergence regionally, we do need to have this deliberate investments, which is actually going to be championed and driven by SACCO countries to make sure that we are all able to participate in a level playing field. So now that is one of the critical things that we need to do to ensure that even smaller SACCO countries are able to attract. I mean, it would be nice to have an industry move from South Africa to Lesotho, which is something we've not seen before because of the costs of doing business, the lack of connectivity in terms of the road infrastructure. Even if you may have labor being cheaper there in that destination, but you find that industries would still remain concentrated in South Africa because it is relatively cheaper and there's the connectivity. There's quite a lot going on there. So with this fund, that's the gap that we are trying to close. We are not saying we're going to be taking industries from South Africa, but you have those industries that can move to South Africa, and would have industries in Eswatini that can move from South Africa, from Eswatini to South Africa, and you have that type of movement where you have countries specializing in that which they are good in, and that requires money. That is why we find this fund of funds to be quite timelessly, and it is one of those initiatives that are going to ensure that we are closing that gap. And not only are we going to be closing the gap regionally, Mr. Ngumalo, because if we're able to close the gap regionally, that means we become relatively competitive even globally. And then therefore what we are going to see is SACCO countries are being able to trade more with the external world. Right now we know that for the smaller SACCO countries, about 50% of all of them, their trade is with South Africa. About 50% of their exports are destined for South Africa. But we want to grow the region to a level where, yes, that 50% in terms of the value in which it is right now, it still is going to go to South Africa, but also improve that productive capacity so that we have something to sell abroad to other countries and improve our comparative and competitive advantage globally. So we cannot overestimate or overstate the imperativeness of this fund.
And of course, some of the leaders there, in fact, not some, a lot of them were reaffirming support for the AfCFTA. Just, how does this new fund complement Africa's broader continental trade agenda, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area?
So I think for me, this has been engineered in a couple of ways, which is one, going to improve the resilience of SACCO countries and at the same time be in a position to allow SACCO countries to get that comparative advantage and be able to trade with the rest of Africa. Because remember, I just said most of the SACCO countries, they trade with South Africa. Over 50% of their trade is either going to South Africa or coming from South Africa. When you're looking at exports and imports, it's the same story. A huge proportion goes to South Africa. So right now, what we are looking at doing, the way I imagine it was engendered, is in the sense that you want SACCO countries to continue to trade within SACCO so that you improve on that SACCO revenue pool. But you also want to create a certain capacity for SACCO countries to be able to trade with the rest of the world of Africa. And we find that in most cases, Africa doesn't trade internally within Africa, we trade abroad because of lack of connectivity within Africa and because of the lack of that, what we call it, the exchange rate lucrativeness. So right now, if you are investing in that industrial infrastructure, you are going to eventually build that capacity to have something to export, to intra-Africa and also all exports abroad, while you are cushioning what we call trade diversion to make sure that you still are getting more or less the same than what you are getting within SACCO. And then also, Mr. Ngumalo, if you talk of integrating deeper into Africa, there is always going to be losers and gainers. As a bloc, SACCO has a common external tariff, so that means countries have to decide what are we going to open up into the AfCFTA and what are we not opening up. So whatever it is that we open up, Mr. Ngumalo, now that is money that we are losing in terms of the revenue pool. So we need that productive capacity so that what we are losing is actually made up for in volumes.
Governance is going to be very crucial here. Safeguards, as I always ask you, what kind of safeguards, guardrails that should be put in place to ensure that this fund indeed delivers economic value rather than just becoming another bureaucracy?
I think one thing that I liked about, this fund when I read through it is the realization and understanding that our leaders sat there and they realized that, yes, in the short to medium term, we need to learn. We don't have systems, we don't have anything. So let us make sure that it's being driven through one of the multilateral partners. In most cases, most likely this is going to be driven through the African Development Bank, while we are building up the systems to make sure that we have the capability. And we're going to get to the learning space. So now those are the safeguards that we need. You want this fund to have a bit of flexibility to be responsive to the needs of SACCO countries, but then at the same time, you still want countries to submit proposals that are going to be profitable. You want proposals that are going to have a positive net present value in terms of their contribution to society. So you would also want to benefit from the safeguards that the multilateral institutions have put there. And you also just want to make sure, Mr. Ngumalo, that countries understand that this fund of funds is not a grant. Even if it is a grant, it's more, well, the way I see it, I think it's more of a concessionary loan with very, very low operation or low interest rates, because you still have to pay it back and you still need to get that money to be regenerated. So now that's where I think we need to emphasize and stress to ensure that we are able to ensure that countries are paying back the money and they're not just going to quickly run to declare sovereign default because we know that it's money that I got from my brother here and there. So we need to ensure that countries understand that, and leaders need to be at the forefront of building that culture to say, let us make sure that we are not the ones who kill it.
And of course, maybe as a parting shot, the role that commercial banks, pension funds, and private investors can play alongside this regional fund.
Yeah, there is space, Mr. Ngumalo, for all the commercial banks to come into the play and say, yes, we want to fund our governments, but can we do it from a place of let's say, a bird's eye view, so that probably we can spread the risk across these maybe 5 countries instead of the government of Eswatini, say, borrowing 2 billion from the central banks, from the commercial banks or the pension funds. So these funds can also find a way of channeling their money in there. Remember, the 5 billion is just capitalization. It doesn't mean the fund will not accept additional funding to assist it grow. So there is space for our commercial banks to go get into the space of being in a position to fund very big projects and benefit from what we call risk spreading, where you are saying, let's come in as a conglomerate and invest in this fund, and we are going to monitor it and get those returns coming through from whomever multilateral institution is going to be running the fund. And then therefore we need to ensure that when we are crafting it and designing it, we have space for local private players to also contribute into the fund.
Yeah, I know I said that was my last question, but You know, the Kingdom of Eswatini has spoken a lot about attracting FDI. Could this fund really be a good catalyst for unlocking significantly larger investments?
Most definitely, Mr. Nxumalo. Remember, I said earlier on, for me, I look at it as a fund that is going to assist us trade. It's an aid for trade fund. So this means we can get the money and go build a road, say, within an agricultural area which doesn't have roads. And now that makes it easier for FDI to come in and do the food processing there, because they know that once we have the road, we have the infrastructure, then it's easier for us to trade. And now that is what we are looking at. That's the type of assistance, the type of loans that I've always said we need as a country. You want these loans that will unlock your productive capability. Now, for example, imagine you're able to come here and process your food, and you're able to have it out of the kingdom in say an hour from Skopje, from King Mswati International, and then it flies into OR Tambo, and you're able to have it out there. So now I think this will definitely unlock our FDI potential.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Really appreciate your insights on the program as per usual. Sanelus B, our economist, chiming in on the 5 billion rand SACU fund of funds. We'll go for a net break now. The program continues when we return.
Hello to all the viewers of Eswatini TV in the kingdom and beyond. Eswatini TV is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech, violence or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on this channel, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your matter to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Babani. Call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@esccom.org.za. For more information, visit www.esccom.org.za.
Welcome back. Let's look at our international news now. Ukraine still controls the strategically important eastern city of Kostiantynivka. The President Volodymyr Zelensky and the General Staff said on Saturday, rejecting Russian claims that it has been captured. Russia's military told President Vladimir Putin on Friday that its forces had taken control of Kostiantynivka, a target that Moscow has long sought in its advance through the Donetsk region.
It's a key stronghold in Ukraine's eastern fortress belt, long coveted by the Kremlin. Now, according to the Russian military, the city of Kostiantynivka is in their control. President Vladimir Putin was in eastern Ukraine, where he was briefed by senior military officials.
Troops of Russia's southern group liberated the city of Kostiantynivka, one of the main enemy defense nodes within the boundaries of the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk-Kostiantynivka fortified area.
On Telegram, the Defense Ministry posted pictures of Russian national flags by shattered buildings in what it claimed was Kostiantynivka. But on Saturday, Ukraine's General Staff denied the city had been captured. The battle for the city, whose population of 78,000 has decreased to 2,000 since the outbreak of the war, has been taking place since late 2025. At Friday's meeting of military commanders, Putin hailed its capture a key step towards seizing Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Taking control of these cities is the Kremlin's ultimate objective in the Donbass.
The Russian armed forces continue to confidently maintain the strategic initiative in the zone of the special military operation, and the liberation of Konstantinivka is of major strategic importance.
It comes as Russian strikes in the Sumy region of Ukraine killed 4 people, including a child, on Thursday, while a major drone and missile attack on Kiev took the lives of at least 30 people. Moscow said the attacks were in retaliation to Ukrainian strikes on Russian civilian infrastructure.
1,000 days since the massacres of October 7th means 1,000 since total war was unleashed on the more than 2 million residents of the Gaza Strip. Israeli retaliation to the Hamas massacre is said to have killed more than 73,000 people and wounded many, many more. And that includes since the ceasefire of October 2025. Benjamin Netanyahu hopes to expand the security zone further and to cover 70% of the Gaza, despite a United Nations warning that this is intensifying risks to all civilians as well as further constraining humanitarian efforts.
In Gaza City, women watched as civil defence sifted through the rubble of this residential building struck 8 months ago. The victims yet to be recovered. Of Gaza Strip's population of 2.4 million, most have been displaced more than once, fleeing bombings or the advances of the Israeli army.
All of our lives have been destroyed. There's no future. We have been starved, sick, homeless, displaced, oppressed, humiliated, everything. There's nothing left. We have suffered a catastrophe of a lifetime.
Israeli retaliation to the Hamas massacre is said to have killed more than 73,000 people and wounded many more, including since the ceasefire of October 2025. Like 1-year-old Suwa, killed on Tuesday in a strike on a displaced camp near Khan Yunis.
She was born in the war and killed in the war. She had just started saying mama and papa. She was an innocent child. We have no missiles.
The October truce left Israel in control of a so-called security zone, which has since expanded to cover 60% of the Strip, cutting residents off from their homes and livelihoods.
This war humiliated us. My girls were injured, my mother was martyred, and my wife had a leg injury. We lost our homes, our farms, everything.
Benjamin Netanyahu hopes to expand the zone further to cover 70% of Gaza, despite a UN warning that this is intensifying risks to civilians and further constraining humanitarian efforts.
Venezuela's devastating twin earthquakes killed nearly 3,000, and updated official figures showed on Saturday as international rescue teams began winding down search operations for survivors in the rubble of the disaster. Now, tens of thousands more are still reported missing.
A volunteer lowers himself into the ground as makeshift tools are passed down to him. In Caraballo, a shortage of heavy machinery has left Venezuelans relying on raw physical labor to dig for their loved ones in the rubble.
It has been difficult because the bodies are already in an advanced state of decomposition, decomposed to such an extent that many times when we have tried to remove them, they fall apart, and we have to take them out like that.
10 days after the twin earthquakes hit, operations are increasingly switching from rescue to recovery. International disaster teams have begun winding down their operations after latest searches showed no signs of life. Elsewhere, the demolition of buildings damaged in the disaster has begun. In La Guaira, residents look on as their former homes are picked apart by an excavator.
In my opinion, this is a collective tragedy. I'm more than grateful to be alive because that's what matters. But a lot of effort went into this place. It's your sanctuary, your home, it's everything.
As services to mourn the dead are held in affected areas, many Venezuelans have expressed anger at what they see as their government's slow response to the disaster. saying more lives could have been saved had they acted sooner.
There were at least 2,025 more deaths than expected in France during June's heatwave. The country's health minister said on Friday, and France last month recorded its hottest June since records began in 1947, with the temperature spiking above 40 degrees Celsius in many areas.
The death toll from the heat wave that battered France in late June continues to rise. France's health minister said on local TV Friday,
there were 2,025 additional deaths linked to the heat wave during the week of June 22nd to June 28th, compared with the week before.
She warned this number is likely incomplete and is expected to rise again once all the data is tallied. Most excess deaths were among people aged 65 and older, and deaths at home rose more than 90% during the week-long heat wave.
It's about 20% of EU homes have air conditioning versus about 90% in the United States. And really, this crisis of the extreme heat that we're seeing this summer and also in past summers, and we will continue to see, is really a kind of a heat mountain that the EU was never designed to climb.
With yet another heat wave expected to hit France next week, people are desperate for relief. At this store in the Paris suburbs Thursday, shoppers lined up ahead of the opening, then pushed and shoved, trying to get a hold of a discounted fan or air conditioner. Hospitals are also doing their best to prepare, making plans for how to secure ice for life-saving cold water baths and how to bring down temperatures in emergency rooms without air conditioning.
We thought we were ready. We were not, actually. Because we were ready to have temperatures high on the day basis, not on the night.
The French government has earmarked 100 million euros in emergency spending to buy air conditioners and fans for public buildings. But deliveries have only just begun, and high temperatures are expected to return in mere days.
Hundreds of Spanish firefighters battled an expanding wildfire near the tourist hotspot of Costa Brava on Friday as Portugal sought outside help to combat forest fires in its north.
Throughout southwestern Europe, wildfires are once again ravaging forests and triggering evacuations. In Vizela, northern Portugal, almost 1,000 firefighters are battling a blaze that has scorched an estimated 10,000 hectares since the early hours of Thursday morning. At least 9 people have been injured, 2 of them seriously. On Friday, the Portuguese government activated the European Civil Protection Mechanism, requesting additional firefighting aircraft as the country braces for extreme fire risk.
Throughout the day, conditions were extremely challenging, and tonight we were still facing very strong winds. Temperatures remain exceptionally high with no overnight humidity recovery, making it very difficult for firefighters to bring the blaze under control.
In northeastern Spain, tens of thousands of people were told to stay indoors after a fire broke out near the Costa Brava on Friday. Catalan police say a man has been arrested on suspicion of accidentally starting the fire while he was using an angle grinder by the roadside. In southwestern France, nearly 3,000 people were evacuated on Thursday after a fire which started at a campsite in the Pyrénées-Orientales spread to the neighbouring town of Canet-en-Roussillon.
As far as material damage is concerned, it's significant. At the campsites, over 280 bungalows burned down. But at the same time, over 400 were saved thanks to the firefighters.
Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu sounded the alarm, saying that climatic events were contributing to fairly severe and unusually early forest fires.
A treatment trial for the Bundibugyo Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo enrolled its first patient on Thursday, marking a milestone in efforts to combat the epidemic, who Chief Dr. Tedros Adhanom told reporters.
A glimmer of hope in the DRC's fight against the rare and deadly Bundibugyo strain of the Ebola virus.
The clinical trial of 2 therapeutics began with the enrollment of the first patient. The partners trial will evaluate the monoclonal antibody MBP134 and the antiviral drug remdesivir alone and in combination.
The latest Ebola outbreak, which has mostly been spreading in the DRC's northern Ituri province, has already killed over 430 people and infected hundreds of others. And with no approved vaccines or treatment against the Bundibugyo strain, much hope hangs on these new clinical trials, which are likely to take months to complete. In the meantime, the World Health Organization stressed the importance of expanding testing and contact tracing and warned against sporadic episodes of violence hampering response efforts on the ground.
Just this week, an Ebola treatment center in Ituri province was attacked, resulting in the deaths of 2 people, and the center was set on fire and patients fled. Such acts not only endanger patients and health workers, but also impede efforts to stop transmission.
The World Health Organization said patients who enroll in the trial will receive comprehensive care and medical follow-up, as well as guaranteed access to the 2 drugs, should they prove effective against the virus.
Human rights catastrophe unfolding in Sudan's Al Obeid. About the United Nations, another human rights catastrophe is indeed unfolding in Sudan around the besieged city of Al Obeid. The United Nations human rights chief said on Friday, warning of a pattern of atrocities and urging the world to act. Al Obeid is the capital of North Kordofan state, a focus of recent fighting in a war between Sudan's army and the paramilitary rapid support forces that began more than 3 years ago and has caused a vast humanitarian crisis.
The scope of the violence is staggering. Deadly attacks, villages completely destroyed. 3 years in, some 12 million people forcibly displaced. The conflict in Sudan has the hallmarks of genocide, according to a UN fact-finding mission on the siege last year of Al Fashir city. And the UN Human Rights Council fears that it is happening again, as the rapid support forces besiege the city of El Obeid.
This is not a drill. It is a red alert that needs to land on the desks of heads of state and government around the world. Their phones should be running hot in the coming days and weeks with ideas on how to prevent atrocity crimes in El Obeid and in other places in Kordofan, where the same strategies are being deployed.
The city of El Obeid is located at a strategic crossroads. It connects the central and eastern regions of Sudan controlled by the army, including Khartoum, with Darfur in the west, which is under the control of the RSF. The rapid support forces have strengthened their grip on the Darfur region since October. And according to some analysts, control of the city of El Obeid would consolidate that hold on western Sudan. And it could pave the way for an advance towards the capital. Drone strikes, mass killings, sexual violence. They have sent millions fleeing to makeshift camps that have little to no aid and are targeted as well. Tens of millions face acute hunger.
We are exhausted. We were displaced to this location and the journey took over a month. There are no aid supplies. We are in need of water and food, as many of us are suffering from malnutrition.
Led by General Hamdan Dagalo, the RSF has been fighting the Sudanese army since April 2023. It is accused of systematically attacking settlements and civilians. In a report by Amnesty International Wednesday, it found evidence of ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, and the widespread deliberate targeting of children.
Thousands of people marched across South Africa on June 30 to demand the departure of undocumented foreign nationals. It's part of a weeks-long campaign that has sent thousands fleeing and claimed 4 lives. In Malawi, 15,000 people have returned home, fleeing xenophobic violence. Protesters are blaming migrants for unemployment and crime, a claim that is challenged by President Cyril Ramaphosa and human rights groups.
Ahmadi Hassani's year in South Africa took a turn for the worse. He left Malawi in February last year and got a job. Then the xenophobic attacks started. He says fellow migrants were hit by cars and he used to run away from police. Now he's back for good.
Luckily, I was among the people who were offered free transport to return home. But now we have nothing to do here for a living. I ran away from poverty and now I have come back to it again.
Malawi is one of several countries organising repatriations from South Africa as anti-migrant sentiment there reaches fever pitch. Hawa Troko fled with her 8-month-old, but her husband's still stranded in Durban.
I have returned home with nothing, and I don't know how my children and I will survive.
In Durban, this is the scene of the latest looting attack. The next day, the owner of the shop reported more than 130,000 euros worth of stolen goods. And its employees, not all of them migrants, are out of work.
There were 19 people who have been working today who are jobless.
On Tuesday, thousands turned out for the biggest protests against illegal immigration in the country for 2 decades.
Anyone without documents and anyone without papers must go back home. Even my children, they have birth certificate. So no one must be in the country without papers.
Authorities said the protests were largely peaceful, but reported 900 arrests. Protesters are blaming migrants for unemployment and crime, a claim challenged by President Cyril Ramaphosa and human rights groups.
Paris Appeals Court is set to rule Tuesday in Marine Le Pen's embezzlement case, a decision that could determine whether one of France's leading presidential contenders can run in next year's election.
The case against Marine Le Pen and other National Rally figures has not turned their supporters away. Less than a year before France's presidential election, an embezzlement ruling could decide whether Le Pen can run, an unprecedented situation for a leading contender. As the party awaited the appeals court decision, it showed a united front.
Si la justice m'interdit. If the courts bar me from running for president, then it's with great energy and with great conviction and great confidence that I will support Jordan Bardela's candidacy every single day, right up until his victory.
Because Jordan Bardella, the party's president, was not prosecuted in the case. That means the 30-year-old could step in as the National Rally's presidential candidate if Le Pen is barred.
I reaffirm my friendship and loyalty to you. I'd like to tell you that we made this pact for the sake of history, to campaign together in the wake of these unjust decisions made against you and some of our friends.
Le Pen and the others were found guilty of using European Parliament funds to pay party staff in France, violating European Parliament rules. But the National Rally remains well placed in the polls, whether its candidate is Le Pen or Bardella.
I choose a party, not a person. I really like them both, and I don't see a real difference between them.
Bardella has not escaped scrutiny either. An anti-corruption group wants him investigated over allegations that he once held a fake European Parliament assistant job, allegations he and the National Rally deny.
After a readmission by President Putin that the army was suffering from a fuel shortage, Gallup pollsters have released new findings that Russia's economic pessimism has hit a 20-year high. For months, Ukrainian drones have been attacking Russian oil infrastructure, as well as the consequences that are now being felt even in the capital, usually the last to feel them.
Scenes that the Kremlin would prefer to hide. Across the country, long lines of cars form outside of the petrol stations that have been able to open.
The situation is bad. There are queues everywhere. Some places have no petrol at all. You can pass 3 stations with no fuel whatsoever, then you have to queue for an hour or 2, or 30 minutes if you're lucky.
I think the situation is not good. They say one thing on television, and in reality, it's another.
For months, Ukrainian drones have been attacking Russian oil infrastructure, and the consequences are now being felt even in the capital, usually the last to feel them. The fuel shortages are also biting at a critical time for agriculture, with demand higher due to the harvest.
Everything's come to a standstill.
I've sent everyone home. We can't work or do anything. I'm the only one left here, watering and feeding the animals by hand.
The problems are such that it's prompted some rare candor from President Putin.
These attacks on our facilities certainly create problems. That is obvious. We are currently seeing a certain shortage, though I would say it's not critical.
The Kremlin said it was considering a ban on diesel exports after already holding gasoline and jet fuel. The world's third largest exporter of oil is also looking at importing. Even before this month's shortages, a Gallup poll conducted between March and May found that 5 years into Russia's all-out invasion of Ukraine, 60% of Russian respondents said economic conditions were getting worse.
It's also the first time more than half of Russians have ever expressed pessimism in any year going back more than 2 decades, and really speaks to the shift in just how much the toll of the war and the wider context around Russia and its economy are being felt among ordinary people.
When asked about living standards in the same poll, 56% said they were worsening. Just 34% thought that in 2022.
The Vatican has rather excommunicated 6 bishops from the ultra-conservative Society of Saint Pius X, while warning that any lay believers who formally adhere to the breakaway Catholic group would suffer the same fate. It comes a day after the traditionalist group consecrated 4 new bishops, openly defying a plea from Pope Leo to desist and exacerbating a rift dating from 1988.
In a ritual-filled 5-hour-long Latin Mass, 4 new bishops were consecrated by the Society of St. Pius X on Wednesday in defiance of Pope Leo. This was the act of insubordination that led to their excommunication Thursday by the Vatican, which declared that the society known as SSPX had created a schism within the Catholic Church. A charge denied by the ultra-conservative group, which was founded in 1970 in opposition to the Church's Vatican II modernizing reforms. It celebrates Mass in Latin and rejects religious liberty and interfaith dialogue.
There's absolutely nothing schismatic, nothing against the Church in what we're doing. It's really out of concern. We hope that one day the Pope will see that. For us, being schismatic is the worst thing that could happen to us. We'd rather die than be schismatic.
The excommunication covers the newly ordained bishops and the 2 existing bishops who presided over the ceremony, as well as those who adhere formally to the group. The ceremony in Switzerland drew 15,000 faithful.
I really like the way they do things. I feel like I'm on a safer road to heaven.
It's the continuation of the Catholic tradition. And I was lucky enough to be here 38 years ago already, when the first consecration took place. And I think it's very important that there is continuity.
The consecrations are a blow to Pope Leo, who has reached out to the conservative wing of the Church. It's the second time the group's been excommunicated, the Catholic Church's harshest sanction. The first was for consecrating bishops in 1988, before it was let back into the fold in 2009.
The 250th anniversary of American independence is colliding with a country gripped by political polarization and a heat wave that is bearing down on millions of people across multiple states as celebrations got underway on Saturday throughout the United States.
For the 250th time across the United States, Americans celebrated their Independence Day. Fireworks, military flyovers, tall ships, and of course a speech from their president.
Over 250 years, the world has seen the great empires, vast kingdoms, mighty nations, and terrible tyrants. They came and they went. But after 2.5 centuries, this American republic still stands tall and strong, and we love each other. That showed tonight.
Trump took time to salute veterans, but couldn't resist taking a swipe at domestic opponents.
Our warriors did not fight communism on battlefields across the world, only to have that menace rear its ugly head right back here in America. We're not going to let it happen.
For a while, the celebration itself looked uncertain. A severe storm warning prompted a 2-hour evacuation of the National Mall before the event resumed. It was the hottest July 4th on record for Washington, D.C., which saw events like the rodeo at the State Fair cancelled in the sweltering heat, along with events in Pennsylvania and Connecticut. But many still turned out despite the heat.
Feeling great. I mean, I think the event and what it means to our country, it inspires you. You know, this is experiencing a little heat's a lot less than what a lot of people sacrifice to give us this freedom in this awesome country.
A day and night of pageantry, patriotism and extreme weather, but also a reminder that 250 years on, America's founding story remains both a source of pride and a political battleground.
That is how we close the curtain on our international news. We'll go for a net break now. The show returns shortly. Stay with us.
Attention retailers, importers, clearing agents and customs brokers. All television sets and decoders entering the Kingdom of Eswatini now require mandatory ESTVA authorization before customs clearance. No clearance without valid ESTVA import permit. Don't risk delays at the border. Submit your application 24 to 48 hours before your shipment arrives. We process complete applications in just 1 to 2 working days. Our QR-coded permits make the verification quick and easy. Always double-check your HS codes and quantities for smooth compliance. The process is simple. Step 1. Submit your completed application form. Annex A with product line items for TVs, decoders, and commercial invoice. Step 2. Eswatini TV reviews and approves. Step 3. Make payment and complete verification. Step 4. Receive your permit. Step 5. Clear customs smoothly at the border. Make sure you have all your required documents, a completed application form, Annex A detailing your product line items, commercial invoice, valid TV retailer license, and letter of authority if applicable. Our permits feature QR codes for easy border verification. For assistance, email us at license@eswatinitv.co.sz or call our help desk. Apply before your shipment arrives. Ensure compliance and avoid delays. Remember, all TV sets and decoders entering the Kingdom of Eswatini must have a valid ESTVA import permit. Thank you. Act now.
Bekunene lo msebenzi lesiwenda kunamuhla ube ngumsebenzi lomkhulu lo hamba isikhathi wahamba eMaswatini onke awubuka ngeliso leliqophele ukuthi konke lesikwendako ugcine livela kangwane ulakhele nini bekunene
ingozi kuthula akayithathe akahambe nayo akayithathe yedenza bakhe
Welcome back, and moving on with the program. For the kingdom, attracting domestic and foreign direct investment is a strategic necessity for building a more resilient and competitive economy. Last year, the Pulpit of Africa hosted its inaugural Eswatini Investment Conference, bringing together partners from across the region and beyond. Now, according to EPA, the first edition generated investment announcements valued at approximately 37 billion emalangeni, signaling that Eswatini is indeed open for business. Now, building on that momentum, the Eswatini Investment Promotion Authority is preparing to host the 2026 Eswatini Investment Conference from the 29th to the 31st of July under the theme Connecting Capital with Opportunity. APA's Executive Head of Investment Promotion, Martin Masilela, joins us for insights into what lies ahead. Mr. Masilela, a very good morning. Thank you very much for your time. So this is the second edition of the Eswatini Investment Conference. Let's start here. What is the purpose of the Eswatini Investment Conference?
Yes, very good morning to you and to everyone. Yeah, the purpose for the conference is basically to harness investments, both, like you've said, from Eswatini as well as, from across the world as part of our strategic objective. You'll recall that, if you look at the government program of action, it talks about attracting mega investments into the country, and this is basically one of the ways in which we're attracting mega investments into Eswatini. So last year, like you said, we hosted the inaugural, and this year we are looking at, ramping it up into an even more bigger, investment conference. So definitely we are looking at attracting investments into Eswatini.
I remember the theme last year, the inaugural conference, we were accelerating investment for sustainable economic growth. And this year we switched up gears. We are connecting capital with opportunity. Expand on that one for us. Why is it important for Eswatini, especially now?
Yeah, if you look at the economic situation just globally, it's a fragile economic situation, and therefore it requires a bit of practical approach in terms of attracting investments. We have been attending conferences, workshops across the globe, and we've been talking policy issues, but I think now the approach is that we want to be a bit more practical in terms of ensuring that we bring capital into Eswatini, and therefore we basically have arranged a number of projects which we believe that they will basically attract capital. So the idea is that we want to be a bit more practical than just a talk show, and hence we are very much intentional in terms of attracting the capital into Eswatini based on the cadre of projects that we've prepared for this year.
You speak of policy interventions. Have we been proactive enough in ensuring that the ground is fertile for foreign investors who, from different perspectives, are used to the ease of doing business, digitalization of services? Have we done enough in that regard?
Very interestingly, this year, as part of the conference program, we'll be unveiling the new investment policy for Eswatini, which basically has a number of the components that you are talking about. For instance, there are some new reforms that are included as an integral part of the policy, like your residence by investments. From last year, if you recall, just after the conference, we basically installed the one-stop shop, which basically serves investors in a more streamlined approach. Yeah. So this year, we're looking at unveiling the new investment policy, which will be backed up by the bill that is being, prepared. Trying to make it easy for business to actually operate and also for foreign investors to come to Eswatini. So we believe that we are in the right direction in as far as preparing the environment is concerned for investment into Eswatini.
As we seek foreign direct investment, we are competing for investment with countries such as Rwanda, the likes of Namibia and Botswana that are mineral rich and are well established in that sector. We are competing also with South Africa, which is actually one of Africa's most industrialized economy and with a really high skill force. What incentives then distinguish the Kingdom of Eswatini from competing investment destinations within the region?
Obviously, you want to look at it from a value proposition point of view. Like you said, we're actually in a global competition for FDIs, investments into our countries, into our respective countries. But you must look at it from a comprehensive value proposition, a point of view to say, what does Eswatini offers that South Africa, that Namibia, that Botswana is not offering? And of course, we pride ourselves with our workforce in terms of their adaptability and their trainability, into the job market. We pride ourselves with government support, like the incentives that you've just mentioned. Currently, we're offering, corporate tax incentives for the priority sectors that basically, keep us on edge in as far as being competitive is concerned as a country. And of course, we're a country that is known to be a politically stable country. And I think that basically puts us above, average in terms of competition among our peers in the region. And that's what we are known for as the Kingdom of Eswatini.
This being the second edition, last year we had the first. Pledges were made. Announcements are one thing, but actually having to act. So allow me to ask, what's the progress that has been made since the 2025 Eswatini Investment Conference? How much of the 37 billion announced in 2025 would you say has been implemented or has made progress or signed?
It's very interesting because we, as the host of the investment conference, we have actually kind of like taken a stock to look at what has been achieved so far with respect to the projects that were announced last year. We have seen, very interestingly, we have seen some very good traction on the ground. But the final details of that will obviously be unpacked during the conference. So there will be a session that will basically review the implementation of the projects that were announced last year. But on a high-level note, I think the projects, the likes of Ubombo Sugar Limited, the 2.4 billion that has been making news, the past months. There's a number of solar projects that are taking off the ground. The likes of Kellogg's, expanding into the country. You're talking about the African Alliance, the mall that was announced, a couple of months ago. So there've been a number of projects that have taken shape in terms of implementation on the ground. And we believe that maybe, if when we look at, a scale of percentage, more than 50% of those projects are actually taking off the ground. At least the rest, obviously, they were at that time at preliminary stages in terms of feasibility study, in terms of, your preliminary designs and all that. And I believe that we'll be announcing them also, in the near future. So there's been quite, I think, a very good and encouraging traction in terms of implementation. But like I said, the stock of that, we will unpack it at the, Eswatini Investment Conference 2026. So that's part of the program.
Some of us will just have to wait until the 29th. Eh?
Exactly.
Right. So you've highlighted on how this tax incentive for priority sectors. When you look at the global investment landscape, what would be some of the priority sectors in the kingdom for the Eswatini Investment Conference for 2026 against some of the country's economic needs?
I think having looked at our, at our investment offering as a country, and if you look at the government program of action, there's a lot of emphasis on industrial infrastructure. I think if you recall, from the speech from the throne, His Majesty spoke about, attracting mega investments into the country that will yield at least a minimum of a couple of billions. But when we look at the industrial infrastructure, like industrial parks in the country, I think that has been already pronounced, at least to have at least one industrial park per region, for instance. So the infrastructure, that is one aspect, but also we're looking at energy. Currently, as you know, we're actually, a net importer of energy, and we want to increase our base load generation in terms of energy.
Sorry, can I interject, Vungans? We're going to have to take a short break. We'll be back. Kusile Breakfast Show continues after this. Stick around.
Attention retailers, importers, clearing agents, and customs brokers. All television sets and decoders entering the Kingdom of Eswatini now require mandatory ESTVA authorization before customs clearance. No clearance without valid ESTVA import permit. Don't risk delays at the border. Submit your application 24 to 48 hours before your shipment arrives. We process complete applications in just 1 to 2 working days. Our QR-coded permits make the verification quick and easy. Always double-check your HS codes and quantities for smooth compliance. The process is simple. Step 1. Submit your completed application form. Annex A with product line items for TVs, decoders, and commercial invoice. Step 2. Eswatini TV reviews and approves. Step 3. Make payment and complete verification. Step 4. Receive your permit. Step 5. Clear customs smoothly at the border. Make sure you have all your required documents, a completed application form, Annex A detailing your product line items, commercial invoice, valid TV retailer license, and letter of authority if applicable. Our permits feature QR codes for easy border verification. For assistance, email us at license@eswatinitv.co.za or call our help desk. Apply before your shipment arrives. Ensure compliance and avoid delays. Remember, all TV sets and decoders entering the Kingdom of Eswatini must have a valid ESTVA import permit. Thank you. Act now.
Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. We are still in conversation with APA's Executive Head Investment Promotion, Martin Masidela, just talking to us about the upcoming Eswatini Investment Conference. And we were actually discussing the priority areas of Unganze. Last year, we saw pledges across energy, manufacturing, agro-processing, mining, logistics, tourism and textiles. I think this year we can expect the same maybe, but also just an addition, automotives, I think. Why are these sectors a priority and why are they so attractive really?
Well, they are these are very important sectors, more particularly that, if you look at our industrial landscape, you talk about energy. Energy is the backbone of industrial manufacturing. So the more competitive you are in terms of your energy prices, the more competitive your manufacturing or industrial activity will be. And therefore, it's important that you pay attention to that. And of course, we must also look at the sectors where you've got raw materials, like your agro-processing, your agricultural value addition and all that. As a country, if you look at agriculture, it's basically, the backbone of our economy. And if now you move down or you move up the value chain in terms of processing, you actually are putting yourself at a more competitive, advantage. Mining, if you look at its contribution to GDP, I think in the past years it has been less than 1%, despite the fact that we are endowed with a lot of mineral resources, and therefore we need to unlock that sector, as a very strategic and important sector of the economy in terms of job creation, but also in terms of economic output generally. Tourism. There's quite a lot of value that we can unlock from the tourism sector. I think currently, if you look at the portfolio of projects from the tourism sector, we're looking at the Big Five, which is currently at the center of focus in terms of investments, which talks about the consolidation of most of the safaris in the country into a single project that will give tourists an experience, but also attracting investments into it. You talk about ICT. It's also a very important sector of the economy because, ICT is an enabler of business. It's an enabler of the economy, and therefore it is a very, important and strategic sector as well. So this year, we're basically looking at some of those sectors, but also we're adding sectors like your infrastructure, like I've indicated, building at least 4 industrial parks as per as much as this command. At least each region should host 1 industrial park. And currently there is, some preparatory works that are going in there, and therefore that will require a lot of foreign direct investment, and not just the infrastructure, but also in terms of occupying those industrial parks. We're also, looking at, energy. I know that last year we basically announced a couple of projects within the solar space, but now we are looking at energy as an aggregate from various, I would say, energy generating mechanisms like your geothermal, like your coal. I think there's a big project that is within the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy to look at attracting investors. But essentially we're looking at base load. Most of what was announced last year is basically intermittent power, but we're looking at first and foremost ensuring that we've got enough and adequate base load for our country, and also looking at potential export, if we are able to meet our energy demand. And therefore there's quite a lot of interest in those sectors, which we believe that there will be a central focus in this year's conference.
You highlighted some of the investments that the conference is actually looking at.
Yeah.
Who are the partners or investors that we're actually targeting through this conference?
We've actually we've done quite a lot of groundwork in terms of, targeting. We are targeting institutional investors like your pension funds. If you look at most of these institutional investors, they hold a lot of, capital that should be deployed for productive use, in the economy in terms of economic development. So they are our main target. And of course, we're also looking at individual investors that are looking at branching into Africa. We're looking at multinational companies that are currently operating, across the globe, looking at branching into Southern Africa. We are looking at, companies that have an interest to actually set up their manufacturing bases here. But of course, we are cognizant of the fact that we also have to give a chance and a space to our local companies that are looking at tapping into those investment opportunities that will be showcased, during the conference.
Yeah. How will the conference then support job creation, skills development, maybe, especially for the young people? We understand that unemployment currently is at 48%.
Yeah.
How exactly will the conference speak to them?
Well, the fact is that, ultimately, we're doing all that we're doing to ensure that there's economic growth, but also there's job creation. If these projects are taking off, in terms of implementation, we believe that there will be job opportunities that are created for our people, and not just for our people, but also through the linkage program. We normally use what is called the NCA investment approach, whereby the moment you've got a big project, it then now creates a space for the suppliers in terms of backward and forward suppliers. It basically creates a space for the small and the medium companies. And these are secondary jobs that are created out of a single project, both from the direct as well as the indirect through the secondary jobs that are created out of that. And we believe that driving these projects add to the meaningful contribution to job creation, more especially the big ones, that basically then create in turn a space for the small and the medium companies to operate.
They say charity begins at home, but this is not charity, this is money we're talking about.
Yeah.
And SMEs often, they struggle to access finance that kind of in some way limits them to participate in large-scale projects. What's the role, or how do you envisage them participating in investing in this country? Because it needs to be inclusive, but also it needs to be a bit more domestic. What's the role do you see them playing here in terms of co-investing in some of these projects?
Yes, like I've already said, I think we look at them from the we're looking at an opportunity for them from the point of supply. I mean, when big companies come here, they will want a lot of services, being supplied to them. And this is the space that is basically created for the small and the medium companies. I know that last year, the Ministry of Commerce, through its institution, hosted the SME conference, which was an inaugural conference as well. I'm not sure if they are planning to host one this year, where most of these issues were actually looked at. But from the investment conference point of view, we believe that these projects, these big projects that will be implemented, then in turn create a space for them to supply, to be distributors, to provide a number of services that will be required by these big projects once they take off the ground.
Is there a target, an investment value that maybe the Eswatini Investment Promotion Authority is really aiming at, or we're just going to have to wait for the 37 billion emalangeni to fruition?
No, we definitely are looking at doubling that number this year.
Okay.
God willing. We have done our work.
74 billion.
Yeah, we've done our work, and I don't want to steal the thunder from the conference, but we're looking at upping that number this year. In terms of what will be announced. We already have lined up some projects that will be announced. But obviously, as is what we say, so they will be unveiled during the conference, especially on the dinner, which is a high-level dinner, by the way. So we're looking at unveiling some of these projects, but obviously we are going up this year than we were last year.
Right. Yeah. The diaspora, they represent a pool of capital and expertise. How can they participate in the conference?
Fair enough. We've been engaging some of the diaspora during the activation events that we've had, at different forums. We have a website where participants can actually register. But from the diaspora point of view, we look at them playing even a more crucial role in terms of being our ambassadors abroad, sending the word out there. They know the investors. Some of them work in these multinational firms. Some of them work in these institutional investors that we are targeting. And therefore, they are our extension as far as, bringing these and driving these investors to Eswatini is concerned. And more than just participation, but also actively playing that role of driving investments into Eswatini.
Yeah. Besides engagements and announcements and many other pledges as well, what are the expected outcomes for 2026? If they'll have contribution to His Majesty's call for companies that make at least a 10 billion annual turnover, what are your expectations from this conference?
Yes, there will definitely be some deals that will be signed, some of which we've been preparing, for them on the ground. Yeah. So we're looking at a number of deals that will be signed. We're looking at a number of projects that will be announced. And of course, I think there's a section where we'll definitely be strengthening, the local presence of multinationals in the country by honoring the companies that have invested in the country for the past 40 years, in line with the 40 years on the throne for His Majesty. And therefore, we believe that there will be some, spillover effects into the economy as far as that is concerned. So we're looking at a number of deals being signed, a number of projects, being announced. And of course, I think the ultimate objective is to elevate the profile of Eswatini as a premier investment destination, more especially to the multinational companies and the global institutional investors that will be coming. We've got a number of them that have already confirmed, who have no experience in actually doing business in Eswatini. Mm-hmm. And therefore, this conference is a very strategic in terms of elevating the profile of Eswatini as far as global investment flow is concerned.
Yeah. We've had the APA reaching out to other partners, activations also on the Eswatini Investment Conference. How can delegates or partners, investors that want to be part of this, how can they register to participate?
And of course, maybe outside of the website, I think we've actually done quite a lot in terms of creating other avenues like a social media pages, but they all basically channel you to the website where you are able to register, online, put all your details, and then make the requisite payment. It's actually a small marginal fee, that is actually required, and we believe that it will take care of all the logistics, from the gala dinner, going to the second and the third day, and therefore you can go online and do the registration through the www.eic.org.za, which is the main website. So you can register as an individual, or you can register as an organization and buy a corporate table. So all that information is actually available in our website.
Your parting shot, please, briefly. Africa's richest man, Dangote, said, if I don't invest my own money, I can never go to any conference and convince people that Africa is a good place to come and invest. Let's microscope it into this population of 1.2, 1.3 million people. Why should international investors consider Eswatini?
Centrally to what I've actually started with respect to the overall value proposition to Eswatini, we believe that we've got a strategic access to markets. We are the only SACU country that is part of COMESA, for instance. So if you are a country that is coming from, let's say, outside of the continent, you are an investor coming outside of the continent wishing to invest in Eswatini, it means that first and foremost you will have access to the SACU market, which is the broader, Southern African Customs Union. But also as part of SACU, you will then have an additional advantage of accessing the COMESA market, as your platform, in which in fact, all the SACU countries are not part of COMESA. Okay. And therefore, that gives us a very big advantage in terms of market access. I mean, investors put their money in expectations of returns. Cool. So the more market access you have, the better in terms of your returns.
Fair enough. Bungaze, thank you very much for your time. Eswatini is open for business. That was Martin Masilela, Executive Head Investment Promotion at the Eswatini Investment Promotion Authority, and we were discussing the upcoming Eswatini Investment Conference for 2026. This has been the Monday edition of Kusile Breakfast Show. Thank you very much for your time. Let's meet again next time. Bye-bye.